Have you ever felt like you were on the edge of a fight with somebody close to you? I had one of those the other day with my 16-year-old daughter, and what ended up saving us from that might just transform your life as well. Aloha y'all, I am Daniel Aaron, your guide to vibrant living. And on this channel you get entertainment, inspiration, and empowerment to help you live your most vibrant, thriving, amazing life. This is an absolutely true story, just happened last week, super powerful, and I am thrilled to share it with you. Stay with me, because I'm going to tell you the story as it happened, and I'm going to tell you the lessons and how you can apply them in your own life right away. Does that sound good or awesome? Here's what happened. In the United States of America, for a teenager to get their driver's license, it's a big deal. It's a rite of passage, it's a ritual, especially here on the island of Maui, where there's not much walking around to stuff. You gotta drive places to go somewhere. So in most parts of the US, it happens when you're age 16, you become eligible for it, though there are a bunch of steps to get along the way. There's a learner's permit, there's a driver's education course, and then there's an actual driver's license test that is presented to you by the Department of Motor Vehicles. It just so happens in this situation with my daughter, she turned 16 in May, and where are we now? September, we have had mega delays, like so many challenges and problems, from the driver's ed courses being all filled up with a waiting list, to getting bumped from one to another, from getting delayed with the driver's permit and getting that, to finally getting the permit and getting going with it. And this was amazing, right? Such a, for me, a beautiful, fun thing. Like, hey, I get to, spend time with my daughter and help her into this next phase of her life. I love it. The very first day where she was in the driver's seat and I was in the passenger seat, right? Student driver, that's how it goes. Of course, I'm a little nervous about it. She, 100 times more nervous than me about it. She starts driving, and lucky thing, on the first day, she managed to hit 1, a refrigerator in our garage, 2, a palm tree just beside our driveway. The great news, everybody was okay. The car got a little bit banged up, and thank goodness I'm not precious about my car. A little scratch, a little dent, that's what it's there for. It runs fine, no big deal. Fast forward a little bit. So many delays, so many challenges. Poor thing, she's just so eager for this to happen. In part because it's just a rite of passage, in part because it means a new level of freedom, right? An ability to do things on her own. And while I love the time that I've had where I'm driving her in the car, even better is empowering her to take this next step in her life. Even with the actual driver's license test, we had another series of delays. Really hard to actually schedule it here. The Department of Motor Vehicles must be understaffed. There's a huge demand of people wanting to it. You have to call at 8 a.m. and by 8:10 a.m. they're booked up. So finally, literally after weeks and many calls, we got an appointment. 2 days before the appointment, my daughter very wisely says, all right, now here's all the things. And keep in mind, part of the challenge here is they're very strict at the DMV. There are stories about how many kids have not passed the test, how many kids failed because of this or this. And of course, understandably, you gotta make sure that everything is correct. So my daughter says, is the safety inspection up to date? Is your registration up to date? I said, I think so, I assume so, but you better check. So she checks and she's like, they're both expired. We had moved and they didn't have my forwarding address, so I didn't get the notice of it. And okay, so I managed to get all of that taken care of, literally the day before the test, and specifically said to the Department of, okay, this is really important. My daughter's going to have the test. Can you help me confirm everything's in order? And I said, yeah, no problem. Everything's in order. Great. So we go to the DMV for the day of the test. We finally get up there, get into the queue, stand in front of the woman, and she says, give us this and present us with this, the registration, the license, the insurance, give her everything, and you can see her brows knit in a little bit like this. And then she says, well, the name on your registration is not the same as the name on your insurance. Oh, well, that's because I legally changed my name a few years ago, and motor vehicle department said that I didn't need to change it on the registration. It didn't matter for anything, not worth it. She says, well, it matters. You can't take the test. So we're standing there, and I can feel next to me my daughter starting to seethe and starting to melt down. She manages to keep quiet through the rest of the interaction. I find out what needs to be done. What needs to be done is I have to get my bank to send me a new title with the corrected name because they hadn't sent the one they were supposed to, and then come back to the blah, 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 blah. A process that goodness knows how long it's going to take. So I say to my daughter, let's talk about it when we get in the car. So we drive there, first cue. She gets in the passenger seat. She's not interested in driving anymore. She's so upset. So I get in the driver's seat and I start driving. She immediately has something like the 16-year-old version of a temper tantrum, right? And I haven't seen this kind of this level of extremity in her in ages. And there were literally tears and then yelling, screaming, and the anger that was there was really ferocious. And understandably, there was also blame, as in, it's my fault. Now, in that moment, here's what could have happened. In my family of origin, when I grew up, what would have happened in a situation like that was anger, blame the other person, defensiveness, argument, more blame, escalating of voices until somebody's yelling at the other person, somebody's saying some mean things, probably things that don't even relate to this situation, venting frustrations. Maybe often somebody says something so mean that you can't take back that it always stays there in some way lodged in our memory. So in an instant, I feel that potential. Now, y'all, here is the miraculous thing. And I'm going to step back to create for you how this miracle occurred. I have been in my life working on personal and spiritual development for 28 years. And part of that, you could say, is I've been learning, healing, developing, and creating myself. Question for you. Have you ever done affirmations? Right? And probably everybody knows what affirmations are. It's where you say something about, you're affirming what you would like to be true. I am happy, I am healthy, I am wealthy, I am happy and people like me. I have, whatever, you've heard of them, no doubt. There has been a lot of great research done recently into how do affirmations work, do they work? And one of the clear pieces of evidence we've seen is that oftentimes not only do affirmations not work, they actually make things worse. Because here's the thing, if any of us are affirming things with our words, like I am happy, healthy, and wealthy, yet in our minds not believing it, right, on a different level, we're saying, I am happy, healthy, and then part of us going, no, you're not. You're a loser, man, or you're fat. By saying those things, yet another part of us not believing it, we end up with a cognitive dissonance where we feel worse in the end. Now, hang with me though, because there is a way that affirmations can work really well. Tony Robbins, he teaches something called incantations, which is stepping affirmations up to another level because you're adding energy and emotion to it. There is some benefit and that can be useful. We're going to go to a whole nother level with this though. I recently came into contact with a being who's an amazing coach and already been very influential for me, and I'm very grateful for the relationship, a man by the name of Steve Hardison, the ultimate coach. And he teaches a variation of this that is very powerful. And I've been deeply engaged in this for some time now. What he teaches is a different languaging on it, which is declarations or a document meaning a set of ideas about who we are. And this goes all the way back to magic, all the way back to every spiritual tradition, because in magic there is a phrase called abracadabra, which means through my speaking I create, or I create through speaking. Take it all the way back to the Bible. In the beginning there was the Word. And you probably know that in the creation of anything, it starts with an idea, with a concept, and then when we add words to it, it gets more solid, concretized, and then it has matter becoming solid becomes a reality in the physical world. This is true of all creation. So the way Steve talks about it is there is a document, and we all have this, whether we've written it down or even thought about it, we all are living out a set of ideas we have about ourselves and about the world, very much related to beliefs, and we have the amazing capability of being able to recreate ourselves, right? What our life is like right now is outer world evidence of what we think. In other words, we can change what we think, which then will change our outer world. Where this gets really powerful and interesting is a very important distinction, which was new for me, that has already been transforming my life in powerful ways. And that is, the way Steve shares this, is a two-pronged approach. On one side is, what's the document you have now? What's the set of ideas you have now? What do you believe about yourself in the world now? So before you write down or create a list of who you want to be, how you want to experience the world, before you do that, you must first get clear on what your current imagery is, what your current understanding is. Because if you don't, and if you don't take care of this or heal this or resolve this, and I'll say more about that in a moment, it's essentially what Steve sweetly calls putting frosting on poop. Show you what I mean. Just like we said a little while ago with, I am happy, I am healthy, I am wealthy, but then part of you is going, oh no, I'm fat and I'm a loser. Then, right, that's the poop, and you can put frosting on that, but it's still gonna be poop. It's not gonna work. The first step to really utilize this, and we're gonna tie this back into what happened with my daughter in a moment, the first step to utilize this is to get clear on what do I believe now, and which for all of us to some degree or other includes negative judgments we have about ourselves, ways that we recriminate ourselves or put ourselves down. I'll give you an example. I've been engaged in this process recently, and a few weeks ago, I did what I normally do in the morning, which is step on the scale. And not because I'm dieting or trying to get my weight to a certain place, it's because that's part of my measurement for tracking for my optimal physical state. So I look at, what's my weight? What's my body fat percentage? And I just kind of keep track of that and notice, and it helps me to be more aware of how I eat and how I move and how I take care of myself. This morning though, not this morning, but this morning I was speaking of before, I step on the scale, and even before I see the number, I have this realization, y'all, that whatever the number is, I'm going to judge myself for it. I'm going to be unhappy with it, because the underlying belief that I saw in that moment was, I'm not good enough. Whatever the weight is, it should be different. As in, if it's too high, well, that means I'm too big, and if it's too low, then that means I'm not strong enough. And of course, all of this was existing on a subconscious level, and here's the thing, this existing document or set of ideas we have about ourselves, for most of us, it's below the level of consciousness, we're not aware of it, and yet it is affecting us every day, all the time. The first part of dealing with the poop is to notice these self-judgments and then forgive ourselves for judging ourselves. And for most of us, when we get that, it's really emotional. We realize, wow, I've been judging myself and putting myself down all this time. It hurts, it's sad. Yet, the allowing of that to come up, right, and then giving ourselves forgiveness, it's a way of taking the power out of those judgments. There are many ways that one can do this, and since 1995, when I learned about the work of Byron Katie, she's been a hero to me, such an amazing woman, and her methodology called The Work is very powerful for this. And I engaged in the work, and I've taught it to literally thousands of people over these years, and there's also been a way that it stayed a little bit for me in my head, right? Less in my heart than it could be than I need it to be. Now, a little personal revealing and context for you around this is I grew up as a fat kid, and it was a really hard thing. I wasn't obese by today's standards, but I was fat enough that it was a big problem for me. Kids made fun of me. I felt badly about it. And it took years in getting into judo and yoga and doing a lot of work on myself before I actually got to the place where I felt healthy in my body. Nonetheless, I still had a part of me that was holding on to that judgment as if there's something wrong with me. And really, that's what all of these judgments are on some level, is a variation of, I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me. So with Byron Katie's work, there was a way that I was doing it, yet it was staying in my head and not getting to the heart level where I could really feel, and this is the key part, really feel the release, the innocence, the forgiveness, right? The forgiveness of the judgment. And so that morning, a few weeks ago when I felt that, and I realized, wow, I've been judging myself as, and again, it doesn't matter what it is, but in this case as fat or not good enough. Oh, a stream of tears really like broke open, and I was amazed at it. And as you know, one of the things that can happen with an emotional release is, well, a new level of freedom. And here's where we tap into the second part of this process. So the poop part is healing, forgiving the judgments, the self-recriminations, right? And we all have some of that. Those of us that grew up in families where we were criticized a lot, or there were a lot of put-downs or sarcasm, and we all get it in some way because that's just part of the human condition. So as we are dealing with that, or maybe if we start getting through the bulk of that, and it may be a process that goes on forever, then we can get into the other side, which is saying, okay, well, in this new space, who do I want to become? How do I want to create myself? Or what is the truth of who I am? Who am I really? And in Byron Katie's way of working with this, it's a response to questions where she says, well, when you believe that thought, right, say the self-recriminating one, how do you feel? And on the flip side, when you believe that thought, which might be the empowering thought, who are you? Who do you become? So when we take care of the poop and we start investing in, well, if I'm not that, who am I? Who do I want to be? Then we can create a new document, which might be a truer document, again, a set of ideas about who we really are and who we are creating ourselves to be. And y'all, this is where the magic and the miracle comes in. It's so incredibly powerful. And one of the great elements that you can bring to this, and as we play with language and etymology and get deeper here, I discovered this piece 28 years ago also when I did a program called a Spiritual Prosperity Program. And in the beginning of the program, there was a declaration. And it was a declaration, as in, I am declaring, this is how I see the world. These are my beliefs. Instead of scarcity, I believe in abundance. So that concept of declaration, right? And you know, for those of you that know the history of the United States, 1776, the Declaration of Independence, when we declare what's true, it becomes true, right? And there's this great phrase called, so it is written, so it shall be done, which it comes from, interestingly enough, I had just found this out, it doesn't come from the Bible. Actually, it comes from a movie in the 60s called The Ten Commandments, and it was a pharaoh who said these words. That said, the concept does relate to teachings from the Bible, and really teachings from every spiritual tradition, which again is, when we say something, we can create it to be true. So here's how it works. We take care of the poop side, then we get really conscious about, who am I? And we use very specifically statements that say, I am, and then fill in the blank. If we do this process really well, it can be shockingly spiritual and even mystical, because we clear away this old stuff that's been lingering there below the surface for all these years. We make space and we say something like, I am, and then listen, and can be very surprised at what comes and what the language is for it. For instance, I heard one not long ago, which was sort of a response to the I'm not good enough or I'm not wanted, and the phrase was, I am a divine gift. And that was really interesting for me, because while I love the concept and it's not a radical concept, it's not words that I would normally use, so it has the feeling of, well, that came from like a higher self or a divine part of myself. If we engage in this process, both sides, what we end up with is a set of statements about who I am. I declare that I am, and really important, we need to actually work with that, really embed it and ingrain it in ourselves. And the way we do that, the way I do that, is by every day writing them down, maybe multiple times a day, and speaking them out loud, as in declaring them. And one of the upgrades that Tony Robbins brought from affirmation to incantation, which is we say it with energy, with the energy of that which we are embodying and creating. So that's the way I work with it. I say it with energy, with passion, getting into the energy of it, and even in that process, implanting the imagery into my mind and subconscious self. I'm making this really quick. We could talk literally for hours about every one of these steps. There's so much to it. And in fact, if you're interested in learning more or going deeper with this, put a comment or reach out to me, daniel@danielaaron.com, and I'm happy to support you with that in various ways are possible. Now that you've got a bit of background, you know that I've been working with this on a daily basis in the ways I described for you, and in even further ways beyond that. So we go back to me driving the car, my daughter Zeta beside me, driving away from the Department of Motor Vehicles. She's on the edge of a meltdown, just this rage coming in her. And rather than going to what I saw instantly was possible, this future of anger, blame, fight, yelling, I remembered what I say. I remembered who I am. Here's the exact declaration that I say that relates very much to this. I am unconditional love and prodigious patience, a divine king giving order, protection, and blessings. Every being, my family, always deserving and receiving my love, forgiveness, and embrace, especially Zeta Shazandra Aaron. Now, do I always live up to that? No. That day though, when we were on the edge of this blowout fight, it was right there. I remembered who I am. And so, did I react to her? No. I let it go. I let her vent. Another one of my statements, declarations, is I am understanding more than the need to be understood. And understanding how much disappointment was there for her. Of course she blamed me for it. And even though I'd asked the question and I got the answer that would have saved us, I could have done more research. There's nothing wrong with what she said. One of the other benefits, and y'all, there are so many benefits of engaging in this process. Again, so much we could uncover here. I'm making this brief though and making it especially useful, I hope, and I'll give you some more clear directions in a moment. My colleague and friend J.P. Morgan puts it this way: one of the greatest benefits is that it is a psychological exfoliant, because when we declare I am this, then every time we don't think that we are that, or our behavior doesn't match that, it's right in our face. So if I declare that I am unconditional love, and then I have a thought that is conditional or judgmental, right, immediately, that's not who I am. I feel that. It's not necessarily comfortable. We all have habits and we all are a work in process. Yet, for those of us that are dedicated to our potential, to truth, to love, having a set of declarations to put ourselves to this potential and then allowing ourselves to gently inquire into love, forgive, and integrate the ways that we are not, it's incredibly powerful. All right, y'all. To wrap this up and make it most useful to you, a few things. One, highly recommend Steve Hardison book called The Ultimate Coach. We call it The Book of Being. There'll be a link in the description. If you go for it, highly recommend you read it or listen to it about yourself, not about him. Again, we could talk more about that. Two, an incredible book by Nathaniel Branden called The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, which also works beautifully with language and helping us to build the underlying self-esteem that allows us to declare and step into the truth of who we are and our potential. For you, if you want to go further with this, step 1, take care of the poop by noticing the ways that you judge yourself, right? We all do it to some degree or another, and then being very gentle, innocent, and saying something like, I forgive myself for judging myself as, and then feel it, let it go. There's a moment of innocence and forgiveness, and in that space then becomes the potential to create who I am. Abracadabra, I create who I am through speaking. I create through speaking. So a list of who you are, and then simplest level, and it could go much further, is write it down and speak it out a couple times a day. Really powerful, really useful, and I'm just so grateful that it was right there for me, because that moment, which could have been a blowout, turned out to be a healing for both of us. And in the space that was created by not having the fight, then we got to, okay, so how are we going to take care of this? I don't know when the bank's going to mail my title to me. So we ended up borrowing a car from a friend. 3 days later, got the driver's license, and now she's a licensed driver and happy about that. So y'all, I hope that this has been useful for you. And if you like this one, you might like this one, and you might like this one even more. Thanks for watching, y'all. Aloha.